Well, I've got with me today Michael Bartl of Hyve, one of the founders of this company, a very interesting organization which deals with some of the challenges around what we could call open collective innovation. Particularly, it supplies and works with organizations to provide platforms for things like innovation contests and innovation markets. But rather than me try and explain, let me hand over to Michael to introduce himself and Hyve as a company. Michael.
Yeah, thank you very much, John. Let me give you short examples and a short overview about what we're doing right now. We started early in 2000 with the idea to integrate consumers into product development. There were no fancy buzzwords like open innovation or co-creation like this at this time. However, this helped us right now, and this also was sure then that this was the right way to do it. We have different competencies in the company. We are industrial designers, so we design products, pre-construct products, and so on, do the quality control. But we're also doing the research, the market research for these products. And this is not very usual that you have market researchers and designers working jointly on one product. And additionally, we develop software, crowdsourcing software, ideation platforms, where we can integrate many people into the development process, ideation process, design process, and into the testing of products.
That sounds fascinating, and I know you've been working with a growing range of organizations, not just in the private sector, also public sector. I wonder if you could give us just a couple of examples that sort of bring these to life.
Yeah, that's interesting, because we do not work, or we do not focus on only one area, because we have food companies, FMCG companies, cosmetic companies, B2B companies, construction companies, telecommunication companies, and the public sector as well. What they have jointly is the challenge to come up with new innovations, to have new platforms for growth, and to come up with the new product generations. And it makes no difference if it's a new yogurt or if it's a new navigation system. It's always a question which features should be integrated and what is the exact combination of these features which delight the consumer.
That's fascinating, and I know one of your examples was around what you call netnography, and you have a number of cases where you've applied that approach. It's a very different but rather exciting way of doing market research. Could you talk a little about that?
So the research approach of ethnography is well established, but now there are different sorts of communities which are more or less consumer tribes to different areas. They exist, for example, in the area of self-tanning. So there are many self-tanning forums. They just talk about how to tan themselves, which tanner to use, to shower before, afterwards, and so on. Also bodybuilders talk about self-tanning because they have to have the perfect tan for the contest. And so this is a great example of these special interest or long-tail communities which can be used for innovation or as an inspiration for innovation, and they exist for animal wound healing, for hair loss, for carp fishing, for whatever you can imagine. And this is a great source for insights as well as already prototypes or ideas which are provided by the community members.
So you're working, and Hyve is working in a very interesting field, crowdsourcing ideas, getting market research insights through things like netnography, in many different ways, bringing more people into the equation than are normally in the innovation process. I'm sure it's interesting to companies, but I'm also sure it's not without its problems. I wonder, could you comment on some of the challenges taking this approach raises?
Definitely the challenge is also to convince companies or our clients, not only convince on an individual level, but convince on a corporate level to integrate all these new tools, methods and techniques into their stage gate process or into their established processes. And for sure these techniques are per se new. So these are new methods like crowdsourcing, co-creation studies, toolkits, netnography. and they do not have that a long history like focus groups or other known and classical traditional market research methods. So there's an evolution in the development of these methods, and there are many of these developments right now, up to prediction markets and so on. And this is quite interesting what's happening here right in the moment, but we have to collect more and more experiences to apply these techniques and to see what makes them effective in what matter and in which way. And this is one thing, the tools and methods side, but also the processes. You have to align all these new techniques and methods and to map it on the innovation process, and you have to change some cultural or organizational aspects, because there must be some driver of these new tools, and these new tools can be implemented for marketing, R&D or other departments of a company, and they should do it in a more jointly way in interdisciplinary teams, for example.
It's fascinating. There's obviously some really exciting things happening in the world of innovation management, but the same principles have always applied. You have to organize, you have to have a process, you have to know why you use the tools and techniques. I guess one last question, and it really comes back to Hyve as an organization. This has grown very rapidly, very successful, employing a growing number of people, as you told me, taking over more floors of the building you're in. In terms of entrepreneurship, as an entrepreneur, if I asked you to give us some experience, some lessons you've learned, what would they be?
It's quite tough sometimes to come up with a new idea and to stick to this idea for years and years and years. Although others say this might not work. So this is definitely a characteristicum of an entrepreneur, to stick with his own idea, even if others do not think this will work. So this is definitely quite important. And I always say entrepreneurship it's more like a skill or an ability. I mean, there are several ways in order to describe it, what makes an entrepreneur or not, but in the end it's more or less about believing in oneself, that this will make it to succeed, this principle.
Sounds pretty sound advice, and obviously you're proof of it, a very successful business. I hope it continues to grow and succeed.
Thank you very much.
Michael, thank you very much.
Thank you.